Well, as a young boy growing up in the Midwest in the 80s, I was like a lot of kids in that I had a hero. You know, one of those sort of public icons who represents all the dreams that you have as a kid of what you want to be someday and become like. But while many strapping young lads my age sort of adorned their room with posters of the 80s athletic legends like Michael Jordan or Joe Montana, maybe, superheroes or even musical icons like, the late Michael Jackson or the amazing pop group ABBA and their musical masterpiece, Dancing Queen, which I've never heard, I didn't listen to as a kid. Here's my point though. While my childhood hero was a little bit different than some other kids' heroes, a little more unconventional, because there was really only one person, like one guy who defined greatness for me as a kid. One person whose name and just watching them sort of made my heart want to reach for the stars. And though it was many, many years ago now, and some of you, youngins out there might not even recognize it, I can't help but even today get goosebumps and just start to get a little excited, my childish awe and wonder when I just even begin to hear this awesome theme song. That's right. Listen, if you didn't grow up idolizing people who were all business up front but party in the back, your childhood probably sucked. Not like this guy, my hero, MacGyver. Oh man, can't you just get lost in his eyes? Oh, I loved MacGyver when I was a kid. He was the coolest. I wanted to be just like him and have his hair, of course. Because while you all younger millennials out there, you're all crazy about your Marvel superheroes with all their crazy superpowers they've been given magically by space aliens or something. No. MacGyver was awesome and didn't have any superpowers other than his hair. No. He couldn't fly, he couldn't run fast, he couldn't shoot lasers out of his eyes, he wasn't super athletic, wasn't actually very strong or anything. Although if you remember the show, he always had this really cool knack for punching the bad guy one time and just knocking him out cold. I think that was just shows in the 80s. But really, he didn't have any superpowers. He never came across as anything overly special except for one key thing. MacGyver could fix things. I don't know how else to say it. Honestly, it's a little confusing if you didn't grow up watching the show. He was really good at science or construction. I wasn't never really sure. But what MacGyver could do is he could make anything out of just the most random junk when he needed to. Whenever he was in a tough spot, he would just find stuff lying around and he'd be trapped in a burning building and he'd grab a roll of duct tape and an old paper clip and a strand of his beautiful hair and get a fire extinguisher. How do you do that? It was so cool. Most haphazard, random stuff. He'd turn them into incredible things. And they'd be like, wow, I love this show. For a kid like me, it was magic. He was like the guy that made you think playing with Legos was cool and would get you a date one day. It wasn't, and it didn't, but that's beside the point, all right? Here's the real point. In all seriousness, there was just something real about MacGyver that I liked as a kid, I think. He wasn't Superman. He didn't possess any crazy, ridiculous powers that we couldn't relate to. He was just a guy who knew how to work with what he had. He was just, if I'm being completely honest, there are times when I look at myself and what I have, God's leading me or calling me out to things, and I don't feel like Superman. I don't feel like I have special powers. I feel like I have a roll of duct tape and a paper clip, and not even the hair. Looking in the mirror, I don't see superpowers and all this talent. And I say, God, are you sure? I mean, who am I? Ever felt that way? Are you with me in that? Ever found yourself sort of sitting on the bench thinking to yourself, I can't step out, I can't do this, because you look at yourself and you just see a few random odds and ends that would never amount to anything. So you just sit there and, focus on failures, insecurities, inadequacies, and all the things you can't do. Well, the truth is we all do that. You're not alone. And it's such a paralyzing thought, isn't it? Again and again, it has this way of keeping us constrained and sitting on the sidelines, afraid to step out, too uncertain and worried to actually do anything. But there's good news. There's great news. You see, despite our fears, despite our insecurities, despite all of our uncertainties, all this stuff, there's this one simple truth that I want to talk about today, and it's this: if MacGyver can take a pile of random junk and use it to save the world, how much more can God take what you have and use it for great things? This morning, I want to just offer a very simple but important message that I believe a lot of us need to hear. And it's this: amidst the craziness, all the fear, all the uncertainty, the ever-increasing reasons not to even leave your house, remember that, right? God is still calling us, his church, to step out and be his hands and feet to bring hope and healing to the world. But it won't happen if we're paralyzed by our insecurities, by our fears, by the reasons that we can't do it, by all the excuses. The reasons we're not able. It just keeps us on the sidelines, and we can't keep living that way. Instead, we have to look to the words of the Apostle Paul, who said this about God. He said, "Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine, according to his power that's at work within us." What does it look like to embrace this reality in our lives, rather than submitting to the fear and all the self-doubt that we tend to do for ourselves? We pray, and we're going to dive in this together. Well, God, as we talk about this issue together, as a church family, as a community, whether we're online or here in church, we just ask, Lord, that you'd speak to our hearts. You'd speak truth to those parts of our hearts that tend to doubt ourselves and doubt you and just leave us paralyzed and not doing anything. We ask today, God, that you would remind us you've called us to something great and lead us out into it, Father, to be the people you've created us and called us to be, free of the fears and just living in what you intend of us, bringing your hope and healing to the world. We pray this in your name. Amen. I want to start by first addressing what I think is probably the biggest lie that we find ourselves believing in this whole issue. And it's this: we hear this idea that God is calling us, that God has a plan for us. He wants to do something in our lives. And immediately, and this could be beyond even just church and things, the first thing that comes into our minds, all of our minds, me too, is to think about what everybody else has and what we don't have, right? We compare ourselves. Like we're the only ones struggling with uncertainty and self-doubt out there. When in reality, almost every person I have ever met who did anything with their life wrestled with doubt and uncertainty and questions about themselves. Can I just share with you? It's the people that don't ever wrestle with that I'm the most worried about. Like, what's wrong with them? We all do. This is true of all of us. Even the people you look at, like, oh, they got it all together. I guarantee you they're sitting by themselves at times just saying, I don't have what it takes. We all do this. It's part of who we are, and it's all over the Bible. All over. You look at the people that God called and he used the most. They were not the most self-assured, got it all together folks, right? Quite the opposite. One of the most important people in the entire Old Testament, like the greatest hero of the Jewish people, was a man named Moses. Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt, out of slavery, did amazing signs and wonders, and his name is like honored throughout their culture. When God calls Moses to go and rescue the children of Israel out of Egypt, right? Gives him this great heroic mission. The first thing that Moses says to God, he looks at him, he says, God says, go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh. Bring my people out of Egypt, right? But Moses says, whoa, who am I? Who am I that I should do this, right? Me? You would think the guy that God handpicked for history's greatest rescue operation, right, would have been a little more like, great choice, God. I figured you'd come to me. I was quarterback in high school after all. No, here's Moses like, me? What are you talking about? And Moses even starts making excuses for why he's not good enough. He says, pardon your servant here, right? God, hold on. Lord, I've never been eloquent. Never in the past, nor since you've spoken, your servant. I'm slow of speech. I can't talk to people. Are you crazy? I can't do this. Moses responded the same way you and I would. The idea of getting involved, of serving, of doing something great, living out God's call in your life, being used for something. And what do? We just look at ourselves. I can't do this. Not like those other people, right? You see others with superhuman strength, X-ray vision, and a flying Batmobile, and you're like, all I have is a rusty hubcap, belly button lint, and an old rubber band. Who am I? Guys, we all do that, all of us. And immediately, all the courage and motivation just drains from, I'll just sit here and maybe just stay on the bench and do nothing. But here's the reality, guys. We all feel this way, all of us. Some maybe are just better at pretending they don't, maybe, I don't know. None of us actually have superhuman strength, X-ray vision, and a flying Batmobile. Although I do have an '04 Honda Odyssey that's pretty sweet. What made Moses special wasn't his talent, right? It wasn't that Moses was amazing. Here's the reality. You don't have to be amazing. You just have to be willing to let God do the amazing through you. That's all he's asking for. In the book of Judges, we read another great story about a hero. And God calls this hero to rise up during very difficult, terrible times for Israel. They were without a leader or not an army. All the people were just kind of on their own. And there were these raiding nomadic people called the Midianites who would just kind of rush into their land and steal all their stuff and kill and rape and then just run away. And so the people never knew when they were coming or what was going to happen. They were constant fear to the point that it says they were living in caves, just hiding out, hoping the Midianites wouldn't get them. And God says, I'm going to call a hero to lead these people and fight back and restore peace to their nation. Read about this in the book of Judges. And it says here in chapter 6, it says, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Oprah that belonged to Joash, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Now, there's actually a piece of historical information here that's really important for you to grasp. It'll help the story take some shape. And it's in this seemingly random tidbit of information that he was threshing wheat in a wine press. Now, threshing wheat is where they would take the stalks of wheat out of the ground and they would beat them with a stick. And by doing that, they would loosen and break apart the edible pieces from the straw, or what was called the chaff. And you would do this out in an open space, kind of like this is a threshing floor right here, out in the open. And the reason is you're hitting this stuff, and the wind is coming along and blowing away all the chaff, getting rid of it. And all that's left is the heavier pieces that you actually want to eat. This is a threshing floor. You do it out here in the open. But the scripture tells us that he was doing this in a wine press. Now, a wine press was actually very different. It was a recessed part into rock, dug in almost like a cave. Hollowed out rock. It would be a pit that would be big enough for a few people to stand inside. They would fill it up with their grapes, and then they would go in with their disgusting bare feet and like stomp it down and then drink it. Sorry. But no, the point is, look at the difference between these two pictures. Big, open threshing floor, enclosed little wine press. The point is, threshing wheat properly required you to be out in this open space and let the wind blow it through. So the people who first heard this, that he was threshing wheat in a wine press, they would have understood immediately what was happening. Why was he doing it this way? Because he was afraid. Gideon was no mighty, brave hero. He was literally cowering in fear. He wasn't ready to take on an army with all the skills of a great general. He was just a scared kid who was cooking his dinner in a closet, hoping he wasn't caught by the enemy. But despite how Gideon felt, or how Gideon felt about himself, God has a much different attitude. He approaches him and he says, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. God calls him a mighty warrior. Because God isn't looking at the fear, the insecurity, the abilities that Gideon doesn't have, the experience he doesn't have, the way in which he doesn't measure up to somebody else. He sees a warrior capable of defeating an army. And of course, just like the rest of us, what does Gideon do? He does what we all do. he immediately looks to himself. Pardon me, my Lord. Same thing Moses said. Whoa, hold on a sec. Gideon, how can I save Israel? Me? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. I am the least. I'm the smallest. Who am I? How could I possibly hope to do this? I don't have what it takes. You've got the wrong guy. You must have been mistaken. I think you maybe took a left where you should have took a right coming to find me. I'm not a hero. I don't shoot lasers out of my eyes. I can't fly and jump over buildings. I'm not enough. I'm not qualified. And honestly, I'm not even that brave. Look at me. I'm cowering in fear. Just let me sit here by myself in this safe little hole and make my dinner already. It's all I feel capable or qualified to do. Have you ever felt that way? I have. But here's what's so big for us to catch, okay? God doesn't respond to Gideon by refuting or denying any of Gideon's claims about himself. God doesn't say, oh, come on, buddy, you're not so bad. You got some good qualities in there, right? You're smart enough, you're good enough. Doggone it, people like you, Gideon. No, he doesn't do any of that. He doesn't do any of that. Rather, he simply says, yeah, I hear you, but I will be with you. That's his response. Remember Moses, called by God? God says, Moses, go to Egypt, do this great and wonderful thing. Moses is like, I can't do that. Who am I? I can't even talk right. God's response to Moses, I will be with you. Guys, there it is right there. That's everything. This is such a clear picture of the way that God works. Moses and Gideon weren't heroes. They didn't have what it takes. It's almost like in our minds we think, oh, so the moral of the story is, really they were heroes all along and they just had to discover it. Nope, they weren't. They weren't heroes in anyone's eyes, but they were used to save the world because God was with them. And just like our boy MacGyver, when God gets a hold of our whole lot of nothingness, we bring it to the table and he can accomplish anything with it. And you can go and read the rest of the story about Gideon. You know, it's a good story. I encourage you to read it. When you read on, he actually takes this much smaller army and defeats the entire Midianite army with sort of miraculous means. But again, you need to hear this. This is important to hear. The point of the story is not that it turned out that Gideon was amazing and Gideon was great. No, the point of the story is the whole time, Gideon was just a guy. God was great. Moses is just a guy. God is great. Every hero in the Bible, just a person. God is great. I'm not up here saying I think you guys are all MacGyver. No, I'm actually agreeing with you that at the end of the day, we are all mostly duct tape, an old rubber band, and a used Band-Aid. That's kind of what we are. And that's okay because God loves to take the small, seemingly unimportant or unvalued and do amazing things with them. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about God and who he is and what he wants to do if you're willing to let him. You see this throughout the Bible. You know, even the early church, the people that Jesus called and collected together to go out and change the world and start this thing we call Christianity, which has covered the globe over the last 2,000 years. Those people, those big wigs, those mighty, powerful people, look how Paul describes them. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. You guys were nobody. The early Christians were mostly slaves and lower-class peasants, and they changed the world because Paul says God chose the foolish things, the things that weren't with respect, the things that weren't highly honored and thought well of. He used those things to shame the wise, to show people who thought they're so smart that ultimately it's not about how smart you are. It's not about how rich you are, or what you have or don't have. It's simply the fact that God is great. And God can take anything and use it if we let him. That's the story. He loves taking these seamlessly worthless things and making history with them. So our own weaknesses, our own failures, our own insecurities, they don't disqualify us from serving God. They don't keep us from advancing his kingdom. They give God an opportunity to do something amazing through us, to show himself great. The Apostle Paul would say it this way about himself, talking about his own weaknesses, his own failures. He talks about having a thorn in his flesh, which probably wasn't a physical thing. It was probably something that he looked at and probably hated about himself. I can't get over it. Oh, I hate this about me. He said, that's why for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses. I just delight in it. I know I'm weak. I know I don't have what it takes. Insults, hardships, persecutions, and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. His weakness, Paul is saying, his lack of having what it takes actually is what gives God the opportunity to use him and do something in his life. Paul is saying, I don't have to try to become more. I just have to remember that God is great. And if I'm willing to just give my life to him and say yes, he'll do anything through me. If I will make myself weak and say, yeah, I don't have it. All right, God, you do it. And I want you to know that this verse is not just some kind of random, I'll just grab this verse and support my argument here. It's a verse that I have leaned on again and again and again in my own life. That I have constantly wrestled with my shortcomings and my inadequacies. I mean, I know what you're thinking. Oh, not you, Pete. You're up there preaching, telling us about the Bible, looking sexy in your fake mullet. Calm down, I'm married. But no, I do know the Bible pretty well. And I can stand up here and be fairly comfortable on a stage and talk into a camera. But have you ever tried to talk to me personally? I'm terrible. I'm the worst, right? Some of you thought it was just you. Oh, no. I suck with everybody. It's okay. I know that. So if you ever thought to yourself, is it just me, or have I seen rabid badgers with more sparkling personalities than Pete? No, it's not just you. I even think that about myself. I really do. I know that, and I hate it. It's the thing I wish most that I could fix about myself. It's the thing I get the most frustrated and wish, oh man, I was different. And it's the first thing that I reminded God of when he came to me with this ridiculous idea that I should become a pastor. I was like, I know you're really smart, you're God and all, but have you really thought this one through? I mean, have you really spent any time with me? And I remember, I say that jokingly, but in all seriousness, being at a low point, being at the bottom, and just feeling like I'm failing, what am I doing? Why am I doing? God, why am I doing this? Just convinced that I couldn't continue. I didn't have what it takes, that my social anxiety, my shyness, my whatever it is was just too much. I should just quit, and I should go work in a toll booth by myself, which does sound nice sometimes, but no. And I said, God, I'm sorry, but I don't have what it takes. I can't keep doing what you're asking me to do anymore. I just don't have it, right? Who am I? And you know what he said to me? He said, Pete, you're right. You don't. Oh, come on, good father. That's not what you say to people. And then he said, but I do. And when you're weak, let me be strong. And that's all that matters. That's the difference between you not being good enough, not brave enough, not rich or powerful enough, not talented enough, not outgoing enough, and being someone capable of great things is the one who's going with me, making me strong. It's to just come to grips with the truth that, yes, I am weak. I am. We are mostly made up with the random stuff in your kitchen junk drawer, right? Some of it's useful, you think. Other stuff you forgot what it was 4 years ago, but it's still sitting in there. That's us, right? That's who we are as people. But the issue isn't about us, right? Like Gideon, God is saying, it's not about you. You're not the reason I'm calling you a mighty warrior. You are a mighty warrior because the God who speaks and creates stars is standing behind you. And he is fighting your battles. He is your strength when you're weak. He is the one empowering you and giving you everything you need for life and godliness, as Peter says. He is huge, even when you're small. And so that's all that I could do, right? And it's all I can continue to do. I can stand up here and joke about it. Yeah, I'm kind of a shy, weird person. I'm sorry. I still wrestle with it. I come to work some days here at church and think, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be doing this. And I think, God, maybe I should go do something. I don't have what it takes. And he says, no, I'm with you. Keep going. And despite my weaknesses, I've seen him take what I do have. The few things that I guess were kind of useful in that drawer. He pulled them out and he's been making something really cool with them. He's been saying, maybe you're not great at this, but stand up there and talk about the Bible. You're good at that. I go, okay, I'll do something, right? Getting off the bench, trusting God to use me for something. And I've been grateful. And the truth of it, guys, I just want to end with this, is that if we think it's about our ability to achieve great things based on who we are, then we probably won't ever amount to much. We'll stay on the side. You will always stay frustrated. You'll always feel guilty and not enough. You'll never think you're good for anything. It's just the way that we're wired, right? Because in many ways we do have a lot. Everybody has shortcomings. We can all look at all the things inside of us and find a million reasons not to do anything or ever leave the house. When there's a great battle to be fought, we'll just say, oh, here's the 9 reasons why I can't do it. I'm no mighty warrior. I can't do this. We lose faith. We grow apathetic. We never really try. But the problem is the only thing that God is actually asking from us is that we try. He's not saying, hey, I'm looking for the best people. He's not saying, hey, who has the most skills, the most talent? He's just saying, hey, who's willing to come and follow me? Let's go change the world. Will you get off the bench? I'll take care of the rest. It's up to us to make a decision that we're going to stop looking down on ourselves. I don't have it. And instead start looking up to God. He can do anything. Let's go. Yeah, I have a roll of duct tape and a Band-Aid, whatever. God can make something out of it. I know he can. He breathed and life formed. He can do anything with me. I'm going to trust him enough that whatever he's calling, he's good for. And when we do, we'll start to see that he can't wait to take our weaknesses and show himself strong. He loves doing it if we're willing. And guys, we have to be willing now more than ever. The world is, I don't need to tell you that. It's hurting. People are in fear. They're in need and more desperate than ever. So are we going to hide in our caves, keep to ourselves, right? Sit in our little wine presses and continue to cook our measly meals while cowering in fear? Or are we going to step out in the presence and power of Jesus and bring hope and healing to the world around us? Not because we have the ability, but because we're walking with the one who does. Are we going to be willing to say, yep, I'm getting off the bench. It's time to do something. Let's go make a difference in the world. I don't have what it takes. Oh, well, he does. That's really it. Stop looking down on myself. Start looking up to God and saying, what do you want me to do, God? You know, part of that is there's tons of opportunities here at Rise City, even online. We need people to join us, to help us. Let's reach the world together. Maybe you're sitting there and you said, you know, today's the day I do want to get involved. Let me give you a simple action step, all right? And I know those of you watching online are really sick of hearing the text in, but here it goes anyway. I want to encourage you, if you just want to get involved, find some ways. Right now, you can pull out your phone and you can text the word SHINE to 48484, the same number that we do all our text to, the word SHINE. And we'll send you this little online form to connect with us. And we'll talk about different ways that you can get off the bench and start serving and start being used. Whether you come in person on Sunday mornings or you're always watching online, we have places to get involved. Or maybe it's just you saying, look around, man, look at my neighborhood, look at my friends, my family, my job. It is time to get off the bench. It's time to stop making excuses about what I don't have, what I'm not capable of. God is capable of everything. Who am I? I'm a child of God, and he's walking with me, and that's enough.